You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Right, Penn State is in the college football playoff semifinals. They are down in Miami, and I am up here in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Happy to be joined by Zach Seyko, who is the host of the Locked On Nittany Lions podcast. Zach, this is a historic game for Penn State. I know a lot of people have said that this is the biggest game in Penn State's lifetime, in their lifetime watching the team. I would assume that the same is true for you, and I appreciate you joining me on the day of it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't think that's something that's been talked about too much, but at least from my perspective. But yeah, I think if you ask fans, you know, young, old, middle-aged, this is because there hasn't been a national championship caliber game, I think, since 1994. But this could go back all the way to 1986 for some people.
Yeah, and it's, kind of a perfect fitting that it is against Notre Dame because of the history that those two teams
Right.
have had. I guess I'll start with a game that seems like it was ages ago at this point against Boise State on New Year's Eve. And I think kind of the headliner for that game was, the ability to shut down Ashton Genty because we had heard about him ad nauseum the entire season. How did Penn State, mostly without Abdul Carter for a lot of the portion of the game, shut him down to the fewest amount of yards all season?
For all intents and purposes, a game plan that was designed just to limit Ashton Genty as much as possible. It was wherever Ashton Genty goes, we're gonna have 7, 8 defenders devoted to him, and we're gonna dare Boise State to throw the football against us. And Penn State had built a lead so much, and there's just a natural progression in football. So as good as Boise State is at running the football, eventually you can't do that if you're losing. You have to be able to pick up chunk plays and throw the football, and Boise State could not do that. So they followed a blueprint, they followed a game script all season long. And for Penn State, it was pretty simple. And that's what these past three opponents, and that includes Notre Dame, this is what these three opponents have in common. SMU, Boise State, Notre Dame are not teams that can will their way back to victory through the air, especially against elite competition. And I know that Notre Dame is, hey, they're not here by accident. They're 13-1. Their only losses to Northern Illinois of all teams, but they were able to beat Georgia. They were able to beat Texas A&M. They were able to beat Army, Navy, and outside of the USC game. But even still, they haven't been in a game where they had to play from behind. Riley Leonard had to pick apart an opposing pass defense. So if Penn State is able to build a lead, run a balanced attack, and force Notre Dame into uncomfortable positions offensively, then that's the blueprint to defeating these kinds of teams.
And another, major headline out of that game that has been a headline is the status of Abdul Carter.
Mhm.
It seems like from the things that James Franklin has said, it seems like he will be good to go tonight against Notre Dame. I don't know if that is official yet from anything that has been said, but on your end, you're expecting Abdul to play tonight, and how much of a difference does it make whether he does or doesn't?
It makes a huge difference if he does not play, because he is Penn State's best overall defender. It's his versatility. It's where he can line up. It doesn't have to be. He's not just a 4-3 defensive end. He's a 4-3 defensive end. He's also a linebacker. He's also a quarterback spy. He's also a blitz specialist. You can use him in so many different ways. And like James Franklin said, I am anticipating that he plays. I think that Abdul Carter, if this was a lower body injury, I think it's a little different, but you can use Abdul Carter almost as this QB spy specialist. His job, his assignment tonight is to take away Riley Leonard. Wherever Riley Leonard goes, Abdul Carter goes. Because I don't know, as a 4-3 defensive end, especially with that upper body injury, we don't know what it is. We don't know the nature of it, the extent of it, how serious it is. Maybe it is, hey, you just needed to go through a week of rehab and you'll at least feel good enough to be able to withstand an entire football game, or maybe in a limited capacity. I think he's going to be limited, but if you move him back to this linebacker, basically you're a stand-up freelance defender. Instead of getting hit by a tackle or a guard every single play, now you are just responsible for taking away Riley Leonard. And I actually kind of like the idea of that because then it puts grade on grade. Riley Leonard's a really good runner. He's not that effective of a passer, but where he beats defenses is with his legs. Abdul Carter, who is dealing with an upper body injury, so he can still run, should be able to take away Riley Leonard in that matchup.
Yeah, you look over to the Notre Dame Georgia game, also from the quarterfinals. That was the Sugar Bowl on January 2nd. What were your takeaways for how Notre Dame controlled that game, and were able to beat Georgia, which not a lot of teams are able to do.
Georgia, kind of in the same sense, they needed to be in a one-score game. They needed to be able to run the ball. They lost Carson Beck. They had Gunnar Stockton, so the offense changed a little bit. I think Notre Dame, just because of how good they are, could play solid defense and just play mistake-free football offensively. The offense isn't asked to do a lot. And when you're Kirby Smart and you're saying our quarterback, who we don't have a lot of faith in as a passer to begin with, we think we can try to score within 30 seconds against this elite Notre Dame defense, which is top 5 objectively. That's a bad coaching decision, and Notre Dame capitalized on it by making a play and setting them up with short field to get another touchdown and then another outlet. So if Kirby Smart just says, hey, we're going to go into halftime, we won't try to get a field goal here last second. You take away that late touchdown. That's bad coaching. That's bad coaching. That's Georgia shooting itself in the foot. And then you have the kick return for a touchdown. That's a great play by Notre Dame special teams, but that's not Notre Dame dominating Georgia to an extent. And then after that, when you're up 20-3, you really don't have to whatever the deficit was at that point in time. When you're up by multiple scores like that against that Georgia team, there's really not much you have to do. Georgia was not able to come from behind and win that game. So Notre Dame had done enough in the moment because of mistakes that Georgia had made to where they were able to win by 2 touchdowns.
Taking a break from, on the field in-game stuff, James Franklin had his joint press conference with Marcus Freeman. One of the kind of the headline things out of that, besides Marcus Freeman's hairline, was James Franklin saying that, no disrespect to Coach Freeman or Notre Dame, but that he feels like they should be in a conference. He feels like everybody should play a conference championship, or nobody should, and that everybody should play the same amount of conference games. Is that something that you agree with?
To create uniformity. So I can look at it from both perspectives. From the sake of whatever the NCAA is trying to do, I don't like the NCAA as an organization running college sports. They've really fumbled everything, and part of it is to their own accord. Part of it is that the court systems are just so unforgiving. There's so many political layers to this that. So yes, I agree that with James Franklin and saying that every school should be a part of a conference, just because we need it. The college football needs some sense of uniformity. But I also agree with Notre Dame not doing it because they make a ton of money. Why should Notre Dame sacrifice? I'd understand if, okay, yes, it makes more sense to join a conference. Yes, you are actually going to make more money in the long run. Notre Dame keeps setting records year over year with its revenue. Why should they do that? Why should Massachusetts do it? Why should Navy? Why should Army? These schools are not obligated to join these conferences because there's no right to tell them to join a conference. Because if the NCAA tries to force everyone's hand and say, Notre Dame, you got to join the Big Ten or you got to join the ACC, make a decision, Notre Dame will sue. And then the NCAA will probably lose another court case and be in debt of millions and billions of dollars between legal fees and then paying out Notre Dame for trying to do that. So until Notre Dame is the big domino. And until Notre Dame sees a pay cut from NBC with the exclusive rights deal, that's it. It's all this exclusivity. They don't have to share the money with anybody. So from Penn State and James Franklin and the NCAA's point of view, yes, for uniformity's sake. From Notre Dame's point of view, absolutely not. Keep doing what you're doing.
And going back into game action, the X factor for today's game for Penn State, Kaytron Allen didn't get nearly enough carries. Everybody seems to be in consensus against Boise State. obviously you have Tyler Warren, who's always going to be a star, and Drew Aller at quarterback. Who's the weapon today that can make a huge difference against Notre Dame?
Well, of course, don't forget about Tyler Warren. I think Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen have to be huge for not necessarily their running ability, but with how Notre Dame is in its secondary between Xavier Watts is that freelance, center fielder. Then Aiden Schuler is going to be responsible primarily for Tyler Warren. And I think Tyler Warren is better than Schuler, but Schuler is still really talented. So I think that's going to be, just grade on grade, elite on elite, where I would still lean Tyler Warren, but it's not going to be every single play like a USC game. Trey Wallace and Amari Evans, I have my concerns on the boundary. I think that Moore and Gray for Notre Dame's cornerbacks are better than Wallace and Evans. And that's not to say that they're not going to get theirs, but it needs to be more frequently than what I'm expecting. So that's where Singleton and Allen, as pass catchers, need to step up. That is where, as blockers, because Notre Dame likes to blitz, they send all these twists and stunts and pressure right up the middle. And if Singleton and Allen, they are going to play a key role in protecting Drew Aller because Boise State certainly got home. These two, maybe you run both of them on the football field at the same time. Again, I think all chips are on the table here because this is the national semifinal. I understand the longevity and trying to preserve them and everything else, but you got to win. And if that takes Singleton and Allen playing on the field together at the same time to just create something different, to add a new wrinkle, that do it. By all means, do it.
Yeah, flipping over to Friday's game at 7:30. Obviously, Penn State had their Ohio State week. They're well versed on the Buckeyes, and Texas is on the other side of that. Who do you like in the Cotton Bowl?
I mean, everybody knows that the obvious choice is Ohio State, but I won't necessarily count out Texas the way, kind of the same way that Arizona State made it a ball game against Texas. And I know that might sound contradicting, but my point is that Texas has now a game. They have a week to prepare for Ohio State, so it's all and Texas. The analytics aren't counting out Texas here. Ohio State looks like this juggernaut because they got revenge against Oregon. They embarrassed Tennessee, and I completely understand that. But Texas, like everybody else, is not here by accident. So I think Ohio State wins. I think Ohio State wins probably in the neighborhood of somewhere 10 to 14 points. I see people saying that, oh, Texas has no chance. This is going to be 45-17 like everything else. And no, I don't see that at all. If anything, it should be closer. I would err on the side of, so my prediction is somewhere in the neighborhood of 38-28 or something like that. But I would not be surprised if Texas does make this a one-score game, if it does come down to a field goal, because Texas is not a bad team just because it struggled with Arizona State in the moment. And that's what I'm saying. This game is not played based on the spread, based on the analytics. It's played on the football field. And Texas should feel a little slighted, kind of the way that Ohio State did, because everybody was counting out Ohio State, saying that, oh, Tennessee will come into town and upset them. Well, they lost to Oregon once, they'll lose to them twice. And Texas is kind of dealing with that same public perception of, you don't have a chance, so why even bother showing up?
And then in Miami tonight, 7:30 on ESPN, it is 7 seed Notre Dame, 6 seed Penn State for a chance to go to the national championship. What's your prediction?
I say Penn State 24-20. And this is going to be a rock fight. This is going to be a low-scoring game because that's how Notre Dame has to win. Notre Dame cannot win in a shootout against this kind of caliber of a team. This is the best team. This is the most complete team that Notre Dame has faced all season. Okay. Wow. They put up 49 points against USC. Well, they beat Georgia. Okay. But that's not the same USC team. That's one that's sold out for the future. And they're trying to prepare for 2025. Drew Aller's the best quarterback that they face. Nicholas Singleton and Kaytron Allen are the best running backs that they face. Tyler Warren's the best playmaker that they face. And Penn State's defense is Georgia probably by itself, but because Georgia does not play complementary football, Penn State's defense is going to be better because the offense helps the defense and the defense helps the offense. Georgia does not do that. Georgia's offense did not help Georgia's defense enough for it to be at its best. It's kind of like the same thing with Michigan. Michigan could have been such a better team this season if the offense just gave them something. From a talent standpoint, that's a top 3 defense. So for Penn State, they're top 10 because the offense and the defense balance each other out. So I go Penn State here because they're the most balanced, the most complete team. Andy Kotelnicki and Tom Allen help in this case. It helps to have 3. I'll add Justin Lustig in there. It helps to have 3 elite coordinators here. Forget all the big game talk. I don't care what Penn State did in 2018, 2019, or 22 and 23 against Michigan and Ohio State. That has no bearing on where Penn State is now in 2025, because those are different players, different coordinators. This is Penn State versus Notre Dame in 2025. This team is better suited to defeat this kind of Notre Dame team here in the new year.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We'll see what happens tonight at 7:30 between the two. The biggest game in Penn State for quite some time. So thank you very much for joining me and enjoy the game tonight, Zach.
Luke, thanks for having me on the show. Appreciate it.